Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It always sounds good when there's more people here. Adoption of agenda.
I make a motion that we adopt the agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Public comments. Does anybody wish to make a public comment at this time? Seeing no one coming forward. Item 6 is the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So there's a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. And then going on to new business, 8A. So we have some board recognition, but we also have a sadder note, a passing on one of our committees, commissions. I'll turn it over to Mike Demling.
Yep, Airport Commission member and Chairman Mike Jacobson passed away unexpectedly on Friday, August 30th. Mike has been at the airport dating back to 2001 when he signed his first lease for a hangar. He's actually owned a couple of hangars at the airport over the years. He learned to fly in 2004 and got his multi-engine rating in 2006, became a member of the Airport Commission in 2006, and then was ultimately elected chairman of the commission in 2010. Outside of aviation, he was an associate professor at UW River Falls, teaching several business law classes. He had a small law practice here in town, and he operated several successful small businesses in the area. And he was a big part of the airport. A lot of the success the airport has had can be traced back to Mike's assistance, and we will certainly miss him.
Quite a shock.
Yes.
Quite the guy. All right, we do have two members of our different committees, commissions, boards that have stepped down. So if I could have Mr. Tilley step forward. Mr. Tilley, are you here? Evidently not. We'll give it to him later, but Jim Tilley served 26 years on the Housing Authority, so we have a little parting gift for him. And then the other person who's leaving is Mr. Frank Nort.
Yep.
Who's on the park board. Come on up, Frank. Get your name tag. All the others. We have a little gift for you for your 16 years on the park board for your years of service. Thank you.
So is there symbolism there? 16 years, you get your name back?
End your life? Is
Yeah.
that's funny. So I want to thank you guys for there's lots of committees, lots of boards, commissions. It's sometimes difficult to find people to serve on these, so we do appreciate citizens stepping forward in helping with your input, your viewpoints. It's just greatly appreciated. That's why we wanted to recognize you guys. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank Frank personally. You're going to be sorely missed. You're a great conduit between the school and the city, and we've done a lot of things in the last few years with the school and the city, and you were instrumental in kind of melding that together, and really appreciate all your time and efforts, and good luck.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks again.
Thank you. All right, item 8B is the Plan Commission recommendation, rezoning application from David and Julie Waldroff, ordinance number 537.
So Mayor and Council, this item was reviewed by the Plan Commission at their most recent meeting. Just in terms of kind of general location of the rezoning applicants, this out here is County Road K, Highway 64 here to the north. The developer, or the applicant in this case, owns about 400 acres on the eastern city limits. I'm looking to rezone. The rezoning process, this went to the Development Review Committee, was noticed in the newspaper. We had a neighborhood open house meeting, so we sent out letters to surrounding property owners. We had a meeting with about 10 residents came to that. This went to the Plan Commission meeting on the 3rd, and then it's here before the council this evening. When this property was originally annexed into the city of Richmond, this was under our old zoning ordinance, so we had different zoning classifications at the time. The orange area here on the screen was more of a highway commercial designation. This red area at that time was more of a higher density residential, and then this purple area was more of a low density residential. In 2015, under our new zoning ordinance, this property was changed just to our agricultural, that Z1, more of that rural residential type of zoning designation. Z1 is really got it again more for ag, so farms, one-family homes, some limited uses, daycare or school. Really trying to provide areas for existing agricultural uses. The proposed zoning, in this case, there would be 2 parcels that would have a Z2 designation, which is the same as what the Fox Run and Whispering Prairie, I was going to say Willow River, Whispering Prairie developments have. And then the Z3 is this pink area up here. That would be our Z3 multi-use corridor designation. Z2 allows for not only single-family homes, but some townhomes, 2-family developments, some also closely related uses like a nursing home and daycare. Z3 really gives, in this case, the property owner a lot of flexibility when it comes to marketing the property. This could be residential uses. This could also be some type of commercial use. In terms of our future land use map, you can see kind of this pink area is really kind of along the Highway 64 corridor, as well as south of town, kind of near the Richmond Way area by Culver's and Taco Bell. As part of the rezoning process, we would look to amend this future land use map just so that they're consistent. One other thing that we looked at when reviewing the application for rezoning is just future right-of-way out in this area. And so long-term, if Highway 64 eastbound were to become 4 lanes, there are some additional frontage roads that would really divide this property. And again, for more of a residential use, it may not make sense, especially right up by the highway itself. So the Development Review Committee and Plan Commission are recommending approval of the rezoning, just with a condition that we update the future land use map in the comprehensive plan. At the neighborhood meeting, there were no concerns from surrounding residents. There's no development being proposed at this time. The property owners intend to continue farming it, for the foreseeable future. But this does give them the peace of mind knowing that the zoning is what it needs to be for their purposes.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve Ordinance 537 with the condition that the comprehensive plan future land use map be revised according for consistency.
And suspend the rules.
And suspend the rules, please.
So there's a motion to pass Ordinance 537 with suspension of the rules.
I'll second that.
There's motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Just one comment I want to throw out. I talked to a neighbor who doesn't live in the city, and they appreciated the fact that the city reached out to them to have this information meeting about what was going on. So I just think it's important just to recognize that we extend ourselves, they're neighbors. They aren't city residents, but we put the invitation out and the notice to folks who don't actually live in the city but do live in the neighborhood of the property. They appreciated that.
Which is good to hear, and this all started because we didn't notify Waldroffs when this was rezoned several years ago, so we are doing better. So and we appreciate the Waldroffs' assistance and all of getting this corrected for them. So, any other discussion, any comments, questions? Anybody? All right, call the roll.
Alderman Zakowski.
Yes.
Volkert.
Yes.
Kittle.
Yes.
Montello.
Yes.
Lindell.
Yes. Very good. 8C, congratulations. 8C is the plan recommendation, Willow Riff Bluffs First Edition Final Plat.
So the Plan Commission also reviewed the final plat for Willow River Bluffs First Edition. We've previously looked at the preliminary plat for this development. This will be done in, again, this first edition. You can see a future edition here would be to the southeast of the property. It's currently shown as an outlot. I think everyone's familiar with the location. This aerial map is from a couple of years ago. Currently, there's probably 25 to 30 homes built already. This is County Road A here, where the cursor is. In terms of the review process for the final plat, this was reviewed by the Development Review Committee in the Plan Commission and before the council this evening. I just wanted to cover a few of the highlights. The report is fairly detailed in your packet. Just wanted to highlight the parkland dedication. This was reviewed by the Park Board at their most recent meeting. As part of the project, a little over 30 acres would be dedicated to the city in lieu of park impact fees. Almost 8 acres of that is upland, about 22 to 23 acres is within that delineated wetland area. There is a conservation easement in place, so that parkland would be guided for more passive recreation. And the Park Board reviewed us. A few of them were brave enough to hike the site last week.
It's a beautiful area
Beautiful
down there.
area.
I mean, I didn't know it was that wooded. It's just gorgeous down there. I mean, walking trails and just nature trails. It'd be a great addition. Really nice down there.
What-
Getting down there is kind of tricky.
And that's actually my question. What is the plan to provide access for the public? If they, some point in the future, how would they get there?
Yeah, I'll go back just to this aerial photo. What we would plan to do is have kind of a small parking lot here. There'd be, I believe it's over a mile of walking trail. It'd be just a mowed trail. There'd be the need probably for 3 boardwalks. That would be constructed by the developer as part of this phase of the development.
So that would happen now?
We would, in the development agreement, we'll have the actual timeline,
Okay.
but it would be done as part of this phase. We'd likely shoot for sometime next year, but we'll finalize that with the developer. It would just be a mowed trail. At this time, a lot of it does go in wetland area. There is access to the Willow River. Like Craig said, beautiful area down there. We still have to determine just the approximate route and location. When it comes up along the bluff, it is pretty steep back there. So we've hiked back there a couple of times with Ron Derrick. We've been out there in winter as well as here in the summer. Obviously, winter, it's hard to tell where wetland area is, but when we hiked it in June, you can tell the definite need probably for 3 boardwalks. That would all be at the cost of the developer as part of the project. The trail itself really would kind of loop all the way down here by the river. We would try to make a loop. That way, if you, up in this development, to see if this could tie in, worst case, it could just be a down and back. Some people may just want to walk down to the river and go back, but it is a long hike. This area goes back longer ways than what you might anticipate. So the recommendation from the Development Review Committee and the Plan Commission is to approve the final plat application. There's a few conditions noted in the report. We'd have a development agreement identifying the cost of the street construction, sidewalk, street lighting. We'll have a cost estimate for the construction of the trail. That'll all be included in the development agreement. And we'll be having a pre-construction meeting shortly with the developer. You already see some grading work going on here this fall.
I'll make a motion to approve the final plat with recommendations for Willow River Bluffs First Edition.
And so there, in the report, there's 9 conditions? Is that, your motion includes the 9 conditions as well, Tim?
With conditions, yeah.
All right, so there's a motion to approve the final plat for Willow River Bluffs First Edition. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
Kittle.
Yes.
Montello.
Yes.
Lindell.
Yes.
Zakowski.
Yes.
And then 8D is the Plan Commission recommendation vacating right-of-way along County Trunk K near First Lutheran Church, Resolution 091901.
This item is really just cleaning up a mapping error from previously. In last couple of years, you may have recalled, we had a similar situation over by the Catholic Church where right-of-way was going through the building, I believe. We also had this over by the center. In this case, there's a small piece of right-of-way that when the last time the road was reconstructed here, this is First Lutheran Church. This road goes down by the golf course. There's a small strip of right-of-way that was not vacated. In terms of, I guess this kind of highlights what I just said. In terms of the process, this was reviewed by the Plan Commission. Before you was just the initial resolution. In terms of the vacation process, it's a Class 3 meeting notice. So this will come back to the council either at the October work session meeting or the November council meeting. It is a longer process in order to vacate it. So this just starts that process. Again, it's just kind of cleaning up a mapping error, and that would be dedicated to the church.
And this is on the north side of the property?
I can go back to
The west side.
Yeah,
This
the
is-
northwest side.
kind of right in this area here.
It's where the old road used to be.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to the north of the driveway to the church, you'd be on the east side of the road itself, just where the road begins to curve there.
So you're looking for an approval of the initial resolution.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve the initial resolution to vacate this property.
All right, there's a motion to approve Resolution 091-901 to vacate the right-of-way along County K. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Montello?
Yes.
Lindell?
Yes.
Sikowski?
Yes.
Volkert?
Yes. And 8E is the Plan Commission recommendation, Water's Edge First Edition, Extra-Territorial Plat Review.
So in our last recommendation from the Plan Commission is for Water's Edge. DCCI Investments seeking to subdivide currently undeveloped property to create 32 single-family lots or B2 outlots. The property is in the town of Richmond. It's subject to the city's extraterritorial plat review because it's within a mile and a half of the city's borders. You can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, the existing development, the proposed development. Basically, it'll kind of come down this way with the street. They'll end in a cul-de-sac. There'll be an additional street that'll connect here to 150th Street on the east. These are included in your packet as well. It's just shown on 2 pages, just given the size of it. The minimum lot size for St. Clair County for this zoning designation is 1.5 acres. I think some of the larger lots in here are upwards of 5 to 10 acres, so they do vary a little bit. The city does not have extraterritorial zoning authority. There's no joint extraterritorial zoning committee or boundary agreement currently with the town of Richmond. And the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals over the years have determined that the city can't require annexation as part of the preliminary plat review. We can't impose public improvement requirements. So the streets out in this development don't have to be built to city standard. It's in the town of Richmond. So we can't require that as a condition of the approval. We look at just some general performance standards, and in terms of the recommendation, both the DRC and Plan Commission recommend approval of the plat review. Again, based on changes in state statute, interpretations by the court, the city really doesn't have a lot of say in terms of the actual use of the property. It's really just looking at the plat map itself. So very limited review. We recommend approval without any other conditions.
And it's super important for people to understand, because if they just listen to that and aren't listening closely, it's not the city's desire is that would become city property. It'd be annexed into the city. We do not have the statutory ability, or so it appears, to force it to be in the city limits.
That's
So we're, basically what we're doing tonight is just saying, okay, it meets the standards. If folks are listening at home and they say, well, obviously the city's approving it to be out there, no, that's not the question isn't whether we really can say yes or no. We're just saying, yep, it meets the standards of that development.
That's correct.
Another funny thing I asked at the meeting, I asked Ron Derrick, why don't you build 1 acre lots? He says, the county won't let you, the minimum is 1.5 acres. So talk about sprawl. Here you want to have smaller lots, and they can't. Minimum is 1.5 acres, which doesn't make much sense, but that's what it is.
Well, they could have smaller lots if they were in the city.
Exactly. But in the township, 1.5 acres is minimum by this county.
Are there any other questions or comments? I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve.
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Lindell?
Yes.
Sikowski?
Yes.
Volkert?
Yes.
Kittle?
Yes.
Item 8F is the ordinance update 50-92, subsection B, underage consumption. Chief?
Mayor and council, good evening. So as we started kind of going through some of our ordinance updates for the year, this one seemed a little bit antiquated with the verbiage that they had of fermented malt beverages, which didn't match state statute. So we took it to public safety on August 20th. Public safety recommended we send it off to City Attorney Nick Vivian for kind of a reworking of that. Nick Vivian did send his recommendation back, along with the ordinance that's in your packet, changing the verbiage from fermented malt beverage to alcohol beverages, which more closely matches state statute. So our recommendation is to approve that new language.
Chief, I just want to thank you and the city attorney because I didn't realize what the definition of fermented malt beverage is. This was unbelievably enlightening for me. And it probably saved me, I don't know, countless hours of watching television programs to get this definition. So thank you for that. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve this updating of the ordinance to have said definitions of the appropriate fermented beverages and suspend the rules.
Perfect. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second to update 50-92 subsection B, underage consumption. Is there any other discussion or questions? Call the roll.
Alderman Lindell?
Yes.
Sikowski?
Yes.
Volkert?
Yes.
Kittle?
Yes.
Montello?
Yes.
Item 8G is the tax increment district, number 10, 30% project expenditure audit.
Mayor and council, tax increment District 10, which is located over by the south end of town. It encompasses Phillips Plastics and a few other parcels as well. It was created in 2014. Over the life of a TID, there's 3 audit requirements that occur. The first audit is at 30%, once 30% of the project expenditures have been expended. The second audit's required at the termination or the expenditure period completion, and then the final audit is when the district actually terminates. So as part of the 2018 audit, tax increment District 10 reached the 30% of project expenditures, which is $700,000, which then triggers the audit requirements coming in. We've gotten an engagement letter, which was in the packet, from Baker Tilly, who served as our auditor, has done these audits in the past as well. We're recommending moving forward with them to complete that audit at a cost not to exceed $6,000. And the source of funding for the $6,000 too comes from the tax increment district.
Do you have a map of, I hate to say this now, but I really don't need it. I'm just surprised that only 30% of the funds are being spent so far. Is it a larger district than I'm thinking?
No, I don't have the exact acreage in front of me, Craig.
Is there a lot of open land left, though, in
No,
that district?
not in that exact parcel. Beth, do you recall how much is?
So what other expenditures are we expecting in that area?
At this point, based upon the project scope, there'd be minimal expenses moving forward. So really, what had been highlighted in the original project
Yep.
was some additional infrastructure that hasn't necessarily been needed at this point in time. You'll recall when Phillips Medisize did their last expansion, there was some additional utility relocations
Yeah.
and some electric relocations, which fit within that scope. But those costs have come in less than what had originally been anticipated as part of the project in 2014.
Okay.
So Craig, to answer your question, it's 17 acres, and it's almost all of it is owned by Phillips Medisize. The other portion is ESR. That's the only portions
it.
that are in TID 10. Correct.
So when do we think that that might be closing?
There's currently some debt that is being paid out of the TID, so we'd be looking at waiting at least until that amortization schedule has been
Okay.
expended to then possibly terminate early.
Okay.
Can we use that money, help another TID though,
Yeah.
if we have to?
There's options, a lot of different ways in TIDs that we can, kind of bring back at a later date as well, but that could be one option.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? All right, entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I offer a motion that we approve Baker Tilly's engagement, their letter dated August 1st, which lays out their auditing of that TID 10 in an amount not to exceed $6,000, with the funds being paid out of the TID.
All right.
Okay.
I overspoke. You seconded it?
I'll second it.
You'll second it. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Sikowski?
Yes.
Volkert?
Yes.
Kittle?
Yes.
Montello?
Yes.
Lindell?
Yes. Item 8H is the 2019 second quarter financial report.
Mayor and council, in your packet, it's the full report. Tonight, I'm just going to go over some highlights, as we customarily do at the quarterly reviews. The first would be the general fund revenues. The actual year-to-date through June 30th has total revenue of $3.2 million, which accounts for 49.2% of overall budget. Again, if we kind of take the quarters equally, we'd be on target at that, anticipating about 50% of revenue is collected by June 30th. Some notable things with revenues, year-to-date property tax collections as a percentage of total year-to-date revenue are 48.3%. That's typically a little bit less than what we've seen on other quarters, but it's weighed a little bit differently due to the sale of the Park building in January 2019 and the balance of insurance coverage that have been collected from the 2017 hailstorm. Together, that accounts for $395,000 of year-to-date revenue, so that's skewing the amount of taxes collected as a percentage of overall revenue. Excluding the Park building and the insurance recoveries, property taxes would account for 55%, which would be in line with the 5-year average. Additionally, miscellaneous revenues, you can see that in this line of $465,000 is exceeding budget at 157% of budget. And again, that's due to the positive variance of the sale of the Park building. You'll recall that we anticipated that sale to occur in 2018, so it was not budgeted in 2019. It'll continue to appear to be a variance through the balance of this year. Other notable revenue drivers for second quarter include insurance recoveries due from the repairs at the sports center, as well as the center had an HVAC damage during the 2017 hail repair that was completed in second quarter, and the PD, the police department, had roof repairs completed in second quarter as well. There's a slight shortfall in library earnings of $2,000 through the end of second quarter. We anticipate that to come into alignment by the end of this year. Additionally, airport hangar lease collections begin in second quarter. The amount that's been collected as of June is slightly lower than past years, but again, those lease payments aren't due until July 31st, so we'd anticipate that by third quarter that's fully up to budget at that point in time. Municipal court penalties are exceeding budget at 65.5% or $59,000 year-to-date. Additionally, interest on investments due to where interest rates currently are at are exceeding budget at 179% or $89,000. And lastly, on the revenue side, building permit and inspection revenue collected is $153,000 or 51% of budget. This is a slight decrease compared to second quarter of 18, but again, the permit revenue is still performing strong and is tracking to budget. And as of June 30th, there were 266 permits, which included 78 dwelling permits issued, compared to 444 permits the prior year and 85 dwelling permits. So pretty close to tracking on new dwelling permits from prior year. In regards to the 5-year revenue trend, you'll see that there's a slight tick up in 2019 compared to 2018 of 49.2%. Again, that's mainly driven from the sale of the park building and insurance recoveries occurring in second quarter. Again, excluding those, the revenues would be at 43.3%, which then would be more in alignment with what the 5-year average has been. On the expenditure side, total expenditures year-to-date as of June 30th, are 3.3 million of the 6.6 million, which is at 50.8% of the budget. Again, just to, expenses aren't evenly distributed throughout the year. There are some expenses that are paid fully in the front of the end of the year or incurred evenly throughout the year, which those can create positive and negative variances depending upon when the expenditure occurs. But overall, they typically offset each other, and by the end of the year, we end on budget and on target. So some examples of that are taxi expenses and ambulance service expenses, which are paid in the first half of the year. Some notable expenditure variances. Again, in the first quarter of this year, we had significant snow events that occurred from February and March, which caused an additional hours of staff time in order to make sure roads were cleared. That resulted in an additional 648 hours. We expect that to continue to be a variance through the end of this year, and that variance of about $24,000 is anticipated to be offset by lower than anticipated spending in other areas. Additionally, too, in the second quarter, I mentioned that the police department completed roof repairs. That will show as a variance again until the revenue from the insurance proceeds is appropriated into the budget as part of the budget amendments at the end of the year. And that accounts for $35,000 in repairs. But again, that was fully covered by insurance recoveries. We received a portion of those insurance recoveries in 2018. And then once the repairs were completed, we received the balance of those funds in 2019. 5-year expenditure trend. Historically, expenditures over the 5-year period have been $3 million as of June 30th, which is 49.9%. Expenditures this year are tracking slightly above the average at 50.8%. But again, when we exclude the budget variances of the police roof repairs and the park building transfer proceeds as well, we would be at 48.9%, which is in alignment with the 5-year average. General obligation debt, as of June 30th, we've made $846,000 in our obligation payments. Most of our bond obligations occur and payment occurs in the fall, in the third and the fourth quarter. So the remaining payments that are to be made in the third and fourth quarter are just slightly above $2 million. And of this mix too, I think it's just important to note that of the full $3 million in obligations that we pay, 61% of that, or $1.8 million, is paid through general property taxes. That's then followed by tax increment districts, paying 31% of the debt, which is just under $1 million. And then the balance is paid through other sources, which include stormwater utility and water and sewer utilities at $246,000. On investments, when we look at kind of the total city portfolio from a snapshot in time of June 30th this year compared to last year, cash is pretty much the same as prior years. Some notable differences of where that comes in is that the capital projects investments you can see is being expended down. Again, those are bond proceeds that were earmarked specific for 125th Street project. and the stormwater 265 pond, which occurred in 2018. So we saw those proceeds being spent down. And then the amount that's remaining in there is for street lighting. That was 140th Street. Was completed. I think they put the last light in this past month. So we'll see that to continue to be paid down as well. But then where we've seen some increases, obviously with the increase in new dwelling units coming in, impact fees has increased as well. So we kind of balance those reductions out and increases. So overall portfolio, we end at $6.9 million in total cash and investments for the city. And then lastly, just on the K-9 fund, the balance as of June 30th is just over $18,000. There were $1,000 in donations and $172 in expenses during this past quarter. And if there's any specific questions, I can answer those at this time. If there are not, this will be posted on the city's website, and we'll also send it out through social media.
Just a couple questions, and I'm going to apologize in the first one for putting you on the spot, so you can give me a soft answer. You referenced the street department is going to be over budget
Correct.
based on a projection and based on what happened with those snow events in the early part of the year. And I know your comments referenced they'll be offset by lower spending in other areas. Do you have a sense of what the street department, assuming we have an average rest of the year, what the overage is going to be? How much money are we talking about roughly?
Well, the amount that's attributable to just the snow event was $24,000.
Yep.
I would anticipate that we'll be able to, with kind of absorbing in other areas, to be having a variance of $14,000. So we should be able to absorb 10 within the Public Works Department, and then from an overall operating, we should be
So
able
it's
to.
$24,000 is what the snow events did to the budget.
Correct.
Okay. And then we have a forecast to borrow $650,000 before the end of the year.
Correct.
And I realize we're not talking about that tonight, but what's the sense of, is that GO bonding? Is that what we're talking about doing there?
No, with that, we'd be looking at either a local financing option or going through the state trust fund loan. So currently, the state trust fund loan is just under 4%. And depending upon how interest rates are at with local options, we should be able to get a very competitive rate. Because of the size of the issuance, approaching from a bonding perspective and the costs associated with that, we really would look at that at $1 million issuance and above to go for bonding.
So it's conceivable that if we do the funding sources that you talked about, conceivably, if it made sense, we might try to refinance that indebtedness if we do some GO bonding within the next couple of years.
Correct. And we've done that
Right.
in prior ones as well, with maintaining the amortization schedule. So the one thing that we definitely don't want to be doing, and has been the policy of the council, is when we do have those refinancing options, to keep the existing amortization schedule in place or reducing the amortization schedule.
Yeah,
But those
it's
are options that we look at, and obviously if bonding and the interest rates and there's a cost savings there, we look at all the debt that's outstanding for opportunities to refinance that.
And then the last question, and Chief, I'm going to put this to you. So I see from time to time, it almost seems like monthly, we have somebody is making a donation to the K-9 fund. And we don't aggressively advertise that we're still looking for that. The community is engaged. And it's a continuing, I think about something the mayor said in the beginning, that if the community, in essence, and I don't mean to alter your words, but if the community supports it financially, the K-9 will happen. Well, they've continued to support it, and there really hasn't been an ask. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So folks just want to do things to help out based on the positive influence, I guess I'll say, that the K-9 has had in the community.
Yeah, and it seems like every time Katie and Storm do some kind of public appearance, it seems like people come out of the woodwork. So, yeah, we haven't had an ask for probably over a year at least, outside of our everyday events that our K-9 is going to with the schools and things like that. And then also we have our fun run in the spring. But other than that, we haven't had any asks.
Well, I think it says something about the program that people aren't being asked to do this, and they're still doing it. They want to be involved, they want it to continue to succeed, so,
Correct.
good job.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions from the council? All right, thank you very much. Item 8I is the alley behind the West 100 block of Knowles Avenue. No?
So just some background information. The city owns a small parcel located behind the West 100 block. So this would be back behind the old saloon, KBA Technology on that block. There's been interest in the last year of the city dividing this parcel and basically just attaching it to the abutting property owners. It's been reviewed in the past by Public Works Committee and the Development Review Committee. And city staff have been meeting with some of the surrounding business owners just to make sure that people are on board with this concept. I don't know who back in the day, years ago, especially in the historic downtown area, some of these lot lines are very strange, but the city owns this little area here in the red. This is EF5 here on the corner, just for reference, Carl's Barber Shop. So this strange shaped parcel here. Today, there's currently one parcel here right in the middle. Today you wouldn't even be able to create that lot because there's not even access to a public street. It's kind of the donut hole here in the center. So really we're trying to kind of clean up the lines back here. This is just a photo of the site. In most cases, it's businesses having it's a fire exit out of the back. They may have parking for employees or customers and for pickup of garbage. And it's just looking down the more narrow portion of the alleyway. I've just kind of sketched out on here, basically each piece here would go to the abutting property owner. And the estimated cost, both for the quitclaim deed and then the survey work involved, I'm looking kind of that $2,000 to $3,000 range. And so kind of a discussion to the council if you want to move forward with this. Again, kind of dedicating the alley to the abutting business owners. And if that cost number is agreeable to you.
Have you talked to the owners?
Yep. So we've been, I've spoken so far with 3 property owners over there. In one case, one of the property owners owns several of the properties, but no opposition. In most cases, the property owners they've been maintaining it anyways. It's too narrow of an area back there for us to plow snow. So most of them have been utilizing it in a sense as private property anyways. But currently the way it is, a business couldn't have an outdoor patio. They couldn't expand their building because the city owns that narrow strip.
Their tax statements, real estate tax statements that they get, not necessarily in December this year, but is it going to read different in the future?
So basically each legal description of each of those properties is going to change. The lot size would change slightly. But it is a very small area, so the taxable value may change slightly, but very marginally. We're talking, behind each building, it may be another, 10 feet by 20 foot area. It's a small area.
So, Noah, when you talk to the business owners, were they even aware of this?
In regards to
That the city owned this little strip of property behind their buildings?
Some of them wanted to walk back there. In some cases, you can actually see where the pins are still in the ground, even in the parking lot. I think a lot of times people just assume the city owns the whole area back there.
Okay.
I don't think they were surprised that the city owned that piece. I think a lot of them thought that the city owned that whole area back there.
Okay.
We hear the same thing sometimes behind Champs. People think that that's a public parking lot, that the city owns that whole area, even though we don't. Some people just have that impression, so. But yes, there was one in particular who was surprised when they saw the map, actually.
And so since they've maintained it as their own property for, who knows, 100 years or whatever it is, would they then, if this wasn't changed and they did apply for a permit to extend their building or put a patio or whatever, that request would be denied because it's city property?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so even though they've been maintaining it, going through this process where, the quitclaim deed, we're essentially just deeding it to them. We're not having the alleyway appraised and then expecting them to, to purchase it from us. But yeah, they wouldn't be able to extend their building or anything back on city property.
And just for general people's understanding, if somebody says, well, how come we're not selling the property to them? Other than expanding their business, they enjoy the use of it, and there really isn't anything the city can do. It's an odd piece of bread. It has no value to anybody else.
Right.
And so if somebody listens to this conversation and says, well, why isn't the city getting the property owners to pay the legal costs of doing it? This probably benefits us as much, if not more, than it does those property owners. I think you could make that argument.
Right, and I think especially when you look, this photo, especially to me, the fact that the city owns this area and what use does that do for us?
Right.
Now, in terms of the survey work, there might be utility easement over a certain area of that area if needed. There may be an access easement needed just for, emergency response, just like there's a fire exit out of the back, those sorts of things. But the city's not going to build something back there. It really has no value to us.
Yeah, and just to add to that, with the city owning that parcel currently, the city bears some responsibility for maintenance and upkeep and keeping it clean and free of obstruction and whatnot. So it is certainly to the city's benefit to clean this up. Secondarily, with respect to the legal descriptions with the CSMs, the legal descriptions will get significantly easier for the property owners. It will be the lot, and it will reflect back or relate back to the CSM, the certified survey map that gets recorded. In terms of whether it changes the value of the person's property, the individual owners of the property, no. I mean, we wouldn't expect the assessed value to change or the relative tax burden on each property to be impacted whatsoever. So it's merely just cleanup on the city's part.
And the 3,000 is paid by the property owners then?
So that was kind of discussion for the council, whether that 3,000 would just come from the city or if we wanted to somehow, divide that cost to the property owners, or if we felt it was just a benefit to the city and a benefit for the downtown if the city just bared the cost. So
What
that
have we
was
done in past cases when we've found pieces like that where we have to, money has to be paid to change the property owner?
I think this one is somewhat unique, just given the number of businesses. A lot of times it's, it may be right of way by the church, for example. In this case, it's its own separate parcel, so it's not really vacating right of way. So there isn't really a recent example that comes to mind, just because it's a parcel where we're not, abandoning a street per se. Has its own parcel identification number even, where if whereas this area here in gray is the actual alleyway. So it's a little unique in that it's its own parcel. If it were right of way, we would just have to say, okay, we get 50% to one owner, 50% to the other. In this case, with it being its own parcel, the city can really draw those lines however we'd like.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve this proposal that Noah has outlined with the city bearing the cost, and we have an estimated budget of about $3,000 to get this cleaned up.
All right, so there is a motion to clean up this, the back alley parcels with the city bearing the cost up to $3,000. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. Discussion. Anybody have any questions? Concerns? Call the roll.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Kittle?
Yes.
Montello?
Yes.
Lindell?
Yes.
Sikowski?
Yes.
All right, then 8J is the board and commission member policy, attendance by phone.
Mr. Mayor and Council, early this spring, the council had a discussion during a work session meeting to talk about whether or not board and commission and council members should be present during meetings. As we begin the winter season, late fall winter season, the question of a policy of whether everyone, including the council and all board and commissioners, should be present, or whether or not we're going to accept phone-in discussion. So we wanted to bring that back to the council to see if there's a policy, one way or the other, as far as that quorum is concerned.
I don't know if I approve of that. I don't think too much of that. I just feel if you want to be on a board or a commission, and you should take time out and be there at the meetings in person. I have in front of me here the parliamentary tips, I think it probably from the Roberts Rules. And interesting paragraph here, attendance by phone policy is, anyone attending a meeting by phone may not be counted towards the number required for a quorum. Only members physically present may be counted toward the quorum. Members may not make motions or vote by phone, and I think with all of those restrictions, why should we even have an ordinance that allows them to call in and be at the meeting by telephone? One thing that really kind of bothers me on this is that when that board or that commission goes into closed session, and whoever on the phone is at vacation or wherever they're at, and they're in closed session, how do we know who's in the room there with them? How do we know somebody else isn't listening? I don't like the idea at all. I think that if you want to take an active role in this community and you want to be involved with this community, take time and be present at the meetings.
The only thing I disagree with, Ron, is that sometimes people are out of town because of business or whatever, but they want to keep up with what's going on. But I do agree what Ron's saying about closed session. I think if that would occur, I think they can't be in on the closed session. But otherwise, I think, people are out of town for different reasons where they can't be there, but they want to keep up with what's going on. I don't see where that's a problem. But the closed session part, I agree 100%.
I think, to me, let's start with part of your
Mike,
comment, Ron, about
Lean
people that,
forward into your mic.
I'm sorry.
Your mic.
People want to, they want to serve. We have a challenge, which is getting folks that are willing to serve on boards and commissions. I think that's what brings up the question to allow it, that right there. I don't disagree at all with the concerns that you have. I think that, Jim, relative to your comment, I think if somebody wants to listen by phone, have at it. But not for closed session. We're going to cut that off. But voting by phone, that's problematic. I mean, who really knows who's there? You're listening, okay, you got a connection. I get the challenge of folks being here. We've got some folks that have served on the library board for a long time, and they're now fortunate enough to be snowbirds. I guess whatever your opinion is about that.
I'm sorry, Mike.
They're fortunate enough to be able to be snowbirds. And so I get the challenge. I absolutely get the challenge. I think from a procedural standpoint, I would be uncomfortable. Jim, to your point, absolutely nothing to do with closed session. They can't even listen. But I would be uncomfortable with them voting, which again does not help the quorum situation.
Well, I don't think you can by state law.
I'm sorry?
I don't think you can vote by state law if you're not at the meeting.
Well, but if
You can. I mean, let me answer that question. I mean, there is an opportunity for members of boards and commissions to call in and participate by phone. But to the points that have been raised, the primary questions do relate to open meetings and open records. What is a person looking at in front of them? Well, you all have the same documents. We know what's been distributed to the group. Those are all public records and can and are subject to production if somebody asks for them. But we don't know what a person who's on the phone is necessarily looking at and what those documents are that are subject to those records requests. Similarly, we don't know who's in the room, and we don't know whether it's open session or closed session. And the purpose of the open meetings law is to provide transparency, not for this group, but for the folks that are watching the meeting, so that they can know who's talking, so that they can know what public officials and appointees are looking at and considering. And so that's the real challenge with calling into meetings. There's a practical challenge in administering the meetings
with people who aren't there with the group to participate in the discussion. But then the question is it fair to the public? And is it reasonable for the public then to have to listen to those that are on the phone without knowing what they're necessarily considering and who's in the room on the other end? So those are the real challenges. Can you do it? Could we come up with a policy that allows us to work through it? Yeah, we probably can. It's not done often, and it's certainly not the rule across the state. But if the council says, yes, we'd like to make some accommodation, there's probably some work that needs to be done in putting together a policy that makes sense and that's workable and that makes sure that the boards and commissions operate transparently as required by the law.
What do you think about this? I want to take this one step further. Okay, so if we had a policy that allowed people, boards and commissions, we're not talking about the council, to phone in to be present as a member and to have quorum standing. Okay, would we, if the public wanted to follow a meeting via phone, would we do that? I don't think so.
Probably not.
Interesting question. Another, I think where you're going with your next question is, how many would you allow to be on the phone?
Right. I think if we say we're going to allow board and commission members to participate by phone, and I appreciate what you just said, Nick, that the state law allows you to draft policies that allow that. But wouldn't it then be fair to say, well, anybody who wants to listen by phone, the public, then they should have a right to do that? And would we want to, how easy would it be to accommodate that, I guess is really kind of what the rub of it is. So as much as I'm sensitive to the folks who have dedicated a number of years to serve, and the library board's a great example, and they have this opportunity to spend time away when the weather's not so agreeable here, I think it's problematic to say it's okay to serve via phone. I think it's problematic. And I'm not of the opinion, and my feelings have kind of changed on this, I'm not of the opinion that it's a policy that we should pursue at this time. There may be a reason with technology in the future, who knows? Maybe people are going to be Skyping in and you can see, I don't know, but I'm just saying, the way it is right now, I couldn't endorse doing that.
Well, actually, we were having our meetings online for a while, or Skyping, whatever you were doing, and I don't know what happened to that.
That's Facebook Live.
Yeah, they weren't Skyping and they were Facebook Live, so it was just live streaming.
Okay, I meant live streaming. We were doing that, and now we stopped it, I guess.
Yeah, we didn't have the technology to keep up. We had some glitches, so we are still looking into that. But that wouldn't allow somebody to comment and those kinds of things.
So with our new software, are we able to do that or not?
I'm sorry?
With our new software, are we able to do that?
That's something that we're looking into, yes.
There's a possibility we can,
Is
we
that
did it for a while.
calling in?
They can view, it's through YouTube is what it is, but they can't comment.
Right,
And that's really what I'm referring to.
You know what I mean?
It isn't the idea that somebody could watch, because we don't televise committee meetings right now as it is, but it's the idea that the public would have an opportunity to speak up if they weren't there. But if we were going to let board and commission members do that, it seems patently unfair to me to say, okay, but the public, you can't do that. You have to be there if you want to make a comment. No, you can listen. But I'm saying if you want to interact with the committee, which you could do under circumstances if you're sitting here, I can't imagine anybody saying, yeah, let's have a policy that allows the public just to call in and interact with us. Not follow along, that's fine, right? That's the open meeting. But to interact with when they're not even sitting there, that's problematic, I think.
We could have public comments, just like we do now.
We don't even know who's making the comment.
Well, they say their name and address and that.
But they're not, you understand, Jim, you're listening to a voice on the phone.
Well, I'm just basically saying that I think board members, and I agree with what you said, because it's harder to find board members, so you're going to require these board members to be at every meeting when they have, at least say vacations, or otherwise they have to leave town for business. We don't want them on our committees. I hear all the time we have a hard time finding good people, and now we're going to say we don't want you now because you might be out of town missing some meetings?
Well, keep in mind, we're talking about a quorum, so it isn't 100% attendance. It is a quorum. So,
But still, if they're not, we're saying if they're not at the meetings, then they're not part of it. That's what Ron's saying. If they can't make the meetings, they shouldn't be on there.
Well, I think what the rules are saying is that if they want to attend by phone, they can't vote and they don't count
towards a quorum.
Exactly.
That seems reasonable to me, if they
Me
want to
too.
listen
That's what I'm
in.
saying. I agree. I agree with you 100%.
But I don't think they count as a quorum, and I don't think they vote.
I agree.
Is there consensus to allow them to dial in, talk,
I don't,
participate
yeah, I don't even mind them participating.
in debate, but they don't
agree.
count towards
They don't count as a
quorums,
quorum and they don't count as a vote.
and they can't
They
vote?
can't vote, yep.
In closed session, the phone is off.
Definitely.
Votes, yep, they're out.
Do we need to write that down, Nick, or is that our
I-
policy currently, or?
Because we always go in a closed session at the end. We don't do it in the middle of the meeting.
I think it becomes very challenging from an open meetings perspective if you have people who are participating that are on a board or commission, that aren't part of quorum, that aren't part of the vote, but they're actively participating. And that's really the question that's being asked, is particularly in this memo, is we have members of commissions that would like to attend meetings and vote by phone. And I think that's problematic if that's the city's policy. If the question is can a person call in and listen by phone, sure, they can, and I would extend that to any member of the public if they wanted to call in
I'm not
and
talking
listen
about
to a
public, though. I'm
particular
talking about
committee meeting.
Actual board members.
But for the purpose of attending meetings, counting toward quorum, participating actively, they should have the same rights as other members of the public, which is to sit and listen, but not to actively participate. Because if you allow them to actively participate, now you have quorum members and non-quorum members, and you're treating them differently than other members of the public.
I know a couple of
And I don't think
townships
it's a
do
good
that right
idea.
now. A couple of townships are doing that right now.
Well, first of all, this is a city form of government.
I
mean, it's-
I know, I'm
it's-
just saying what other bodies do, and it's
I don't want to
not.
bring the townships into it, because let's discuss our problem here tonight.
Mr. Waldroff?
Gentlemen, I drove 140 miles tonight to be at this meeting. I got to drive 140 to get back. I hired you guys to be on this committee, or on this council for me. I pay my taxes, and I expect people to sit here and answer a question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Do you want us to talk on the mic? Sorry about that.
So isn't there normally, when you set up your rules, you're allowed to miss so many meetings as a member? I don't know if it's 2 or 3, whatever it is. It would seem to make sense to me that if you miss consecutively, if you're going to be gone for 4 meetings over the course of the winter, that is like part-time participation. If you miss one because of meetings or you have an emergency situation, that makes sense. That seems to be what the rule is for.
I think.
Great observation.
Relative to technology, and I know we don't do this. I think the county, they video.
I believe all their committees.
All the committee meetings are done. And I'm wondering, even as a first step, the idea of us being able to just put audio out live via Facebook, is the technology there where you can have that speaker that sits in the middle of the room, and anybody who wants to can attend the meeting, could at least listen. I think that's a great idea to increase transparency. So I don't know if we really need to do anything tonight. I guess the way the policy is right now, you can't participate from a quorum. That's the wrong word to say, but you don't get counted for being in attendance if you're doing it by phone.
Yeah, I think the reason why this is coming up was an ask from the library board, the city's position, as we have members that are going to be heading out within the next 45 days or so. So they asked us to put this on the agenda just to get a sense, and if the consensus is that the preference is to move forward with boards being, with members being present. As Tom mentioned, to look at if they're gone X number of meetings, that they'd have to look at being replaced. This is obviously a critical time for the library, and so they want to make sure that, they've got the direction from the council. And so again, if that's the preference, what I can do is go back to the board to say the position is that members be present.
I think that's the consensus.
Okay.
But I think.
What is the consensus? Amy,
Kind of
I know
continue as
Nick's
it is right now.
consensus of,
But Nick has brought up some good points.
Yeah.
It's questionable whether they should be able to participate. They can definitely listen.
How about listen, Nick? Is that okay? If they just listen to what's going on?
Certainly, yeah, and I think it's not any different than, the gentleman had a comment, so he raised his hand, and the mayor recognizes him, and he comes to the podium, and he provides his input. If a person is on the phone and they have input on a particular topic, so long as the chair of that commission recognizes that person and authorizes them to speak, that's fine. But what I'd like to try to avoid in doing that is, kind of skirting the rules to say, I'm going to participate meaningfully in the discussion of the commission from Florida or Arizona or wherever, because I can't be there. I mean, that's really, we don't want non-voting members participating as though they were there, right? They can listen, they can offer input when authorized, but we don't want to make that the norm.
Okay. And I'm not 100% sure on how it's worked with the library in the past 2-3 years, with one in particular. Does he or she listen in now?
Yeah, and so that, and they've voted in the past as well. So again, the crux of this, what I'm hearing is that the preference is that board members be present for all votes.
And
so
can't be considered a quorum without.
And would not be considered
Right.
a quorum. Yeah.
So Mike, in the past, there has been a member or members?
There have been members,
that has
yes.
voted while on the phone?
Yes, that is correct.
Oh.
And that's why we brought that up in March as a discussion item to get some clear policy. And at that time, there was still some discussion. So we wanted to bring that back prior to moving into the winter months.
But just relative to a comment Nick just made, I actually further think it's problematic if we're going to recognize audience comments via phone. I mean, I just think as a policy that Mr. Waldroff, as he said, drove 140 miles to be here. If we had that policy, and I realize we're talking about a council meeting, but take this to a committee, no, you don't have to come. Just call us and make your comment. And I don't think that's good policy. I think if somebody wants to listen, but they cannot interact, if they just want to listen, because again, we broadcast this tonight. Folks in this community are listening to what's going on. But you can't, we don't have
the technology for them to interact back.
I don't think we necessarily want them to, in an official capacity, to text in your public comment you want to make. You got to come down here. And so I just think that if you're a board member, and I know this is specifically what we're talking about, okay, you can't vote, it doesn't count towards a quorum, but for you to even have conversation back relative to the group, that shouldn't be allowed either. We don't want the public to do that. So I don't understand why we would create a second set of rules. And really, we're not talking about voting, we're not talking about counting towards a quorum, but even to have discussion, you need to be there. I mean, I think that's the way government is designed to work, certainly at our level, and I think that's the way it works the best.
Well put. All right. Any other comments?
Well, I don't think if they're allowed to listen in, then to expect that they're not going to add comment we're not being realistic.
No, we're not.
Well, sure you are, if they don't have the ability to talk.
Well, if they have a phone connection, they'll have the ability to talk.
Well, I didn't say necessarily phone. I mean, for example, we broadcast a video and audio tonight. You could broadcast audio, right? And I think it actually shouldn't be by one person calling in. I think we need to create a feed. If it's via Facebook, that's the end of my technological knowledge. If it's via that, where anybody then has to have the right to be able to listen in, I don't think you make accommodation for one person to listen in. I think you do it via public means, and anybody in the public can, but they have no ability to come back the other direction with, to go plus instead of listen.
So, Mr. Mayor, what I'd offer is just so that we have something to move forward with board and commission members is a recommendation on a policy that states that board and commission members must be present for all votes and for a quorum.
Mm-hmm. What is that? What do we currently have as a policy? Do we know? Isn't it that?
It's only with the council that we have any kind
Yeah.
of policy.
So this would
Anything-
extend.
Nothing with.
So we
the-
haven't really spelled out boards or commissions.
Right.
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
That's where we started talking about this on the 25th of March.
Okay.
Wanted to come back.
Yeah, and the important thing to understand is that boards and commissions are public bodies under
Yeah,
the open meetings and open records laws. So.
So Nick is going to write something up and bring that back to us.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much. Item 9 is communications and miscellaneous. So Saturday is a parade. The American Legion is celebrating 100 years. There's a parade starts at 1 o'clock. So come on down, enjoy, and show your support for our American Legion. It's a long time to be an organization. Any other communications or miscellaneous?
Mr. Mayor, I do have one announcement regarding a public meeting next Monday from 5:30 to 7, just to kind of discuss bike and pedestrian improvements on East First Street and West 8th Street. So kind of just initially kicking off those and getting public input. So if folks are interested in coming out, 5:30 to 7, it'll be here at the Civic Center next Monday.
All right, and also on the overhead, League of Wisconsin Municipalities Conference in Green Bay in October. If aldermen want to go to that, let Tanya know so she can get the reservations in. Deadline, or early bird deadline, is September 13th. And Jeremiah, the flag that was outside your door, if you saw that, I picked it up. It was laying down along the street up by Skoglund's. So if anybody accused the mayor of stealing a flag, I stopped over the weekend, picked it up, and brought it down here to City Hall.
Thank you.
Any other communications? All right, closed session per state statute 19.85, 1EG, sale of land in TID number 6, and the DOA relocation complaint update.
Can't get in. They can't contribute.
Listen in.
Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
We have a motion to go into closed session. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Call the roll.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Montello?
Yes.
Lindell?
Yes.
Zakowski?
Yes.
Volkert?
Yes.
We'll take just a quick couple minutes.
Representative. I think that's the way it has to be. As much as you could look at certain situations and say, boy, it'd be nice if we had something to deal with that, I think you open it up to say, well, wait a second.
Well, where the ADA comes in, it's one of the reasons that meetings need to be held at City Hall.